Welcome to the Beth Yeshua podcast. For more episodes like this, visit bethyeshua.org/media. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Beth Yeshua podcast. I'm Josh Rubenstein, one of your hosts, and today we have some special guests. But first, my co-host. Hi, Sherry Rubenstein. Hi, Bubby.
Hi, Josh. Son.
And then today we also have Rabbi Jude and his wife Jennifer, who are leaders of a Messianic Congregation. And we got to hang out with them at the UMJC conference, which is really cool. That's when we found out that maybe more than just 12 people listen to our podcast. And so we actually wanted to have a conversation with them. They've grown up within Messianic Judaism and are leading, and not just leading a community, but also Jude is one of the guys on leadership in the UMJC too, which is really cool. And then we just want you guys to know that we're going to be not using last names and not referring to their community by its name, and that's just because there's still a lot of discrimination against Messianic Judaism, and we're trying to be sensitive to that, and we're just grateful that we get to have this conversation. As always, if you guys would like to see us instead of just hear us, you can go to YouTube and look up Beth Yeshua Sacramento. We're the one in Sacramento. There's a lot of Beth Yeshuas out there. So, in fact, we were just talking about this in our leadership meeting last Shabbat. On a regular basis, we get donations to the other Beth Yeshua, like the big
Several
Beth Yeshua,
others.
I think
Yeah.
in Georgia,
Like the right.
Yeah, the one in
yes.
Georgia.
Okay.
And so, like on a regular basis, we're writing checks to the one in Georgia, and like sending it back. So, just search for Beth Yeshua Sacramento, and you'll find us on wherever you get podcasts. Well, Jude and Jennifer, I just want to say thank you for being willing to do this. And then we definitely talked about where we wanted the conversation to head. I wonder if you guys could just jump in and give us a little bit of your history, maybe growing up in Messianic Judaism, however far back you guys want to go, and we'll just let the conversation start there.
Well, I'll start. Thank you for having us. We've enjoyed your podcast, and we think it's doing something significant within Messianic Judaism. And I think as we move forward and as we mature as a Messianic Judaism, I think things like this are so necessary. So I'll start, and then Jennifer can pick up. We've been married for almost 30 years.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Mazel tov.
Us too. Mazel
Thank
tov.
you. It'll be 29 years this coming December.
So we're just rounding up.
Yeah, we're just rounding up.
That's okay.
You can round up. It's over 25. So we entered into Messianic Judaism really over 30 years ago each. I started attending a Messianic synagogue in 1991. Actually, the one that I lead now, I started attending in 1991. I was 16 years old. And it was the beginnings of the congregation, as I know many congregations started in the late 80s or the early 90s, yours as well, I believe. So, I was 16 coming into this and kind of never looked back. I've been involved for over 30 years, and a couple of years after, I'm 4 years older than Jennifer, a couple of years after I started attending, her family started attending. So you want to maybe say a couple of words about that?
So I come from a family of believers. My parents were believers, so I'm second generation.
Great.
And so I had like a cultural Jewish background prior to attending our Messianic synagogue. We would do Jewish things at home. We attended some random like Messianic Friday night home things.
Yeah, sure.
Until my parents found out about the synagogue that we started going to. And they went cold turkey. 1 week we were at the church we were very involved in. They went on Saturday to the Messianic synagogue. They came home and they said, "That's it, we're switching."
Oh, wow.
And so we switched over, and that's actually where Jude and I met. So, I was...
How old were you then when you guys met?
I was 15 at the time.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was like 3 years later that we started, dating and got married. And so that was, so we
That's
both
great.
really started in our teenage years.
Okay. I'm actually a little bit curious about that, maybe for both of you. For me, coming into Messianic Judaism, our family was kind of like attending an independent charismatic Christian church before we started going to a Messianic synagogue. What was the culture shock, or was there any culture shock, or was it difficult for either of you as you transitioned into worshiping at a Messianic synagogue?
I'll answer that first. My church experience prior was not, it wasn't, we weren't attending charismatics places, but I had been to some. So it wasn't like the whole raising hands wasn't a weird culture shock to me. But that wasn't my like normal Sunday experience. We had been to like Baptist, EV Free. The church that my parents got saved in was a Brethren church. So very different. Yeah. So, but it wasn't a culture shock because oddly enough, my biological father passed away when I was very young, and my mom, he was very into playing guitar and everything. He came from a Catholic background, but he had gotten into Lamb before he passed away. So when I was young, my mom had played these Lamb albums.
Yes.
So then we show up at this Messianic synagogue, and the praise and worship, they're playing these songs, and I'm like, wait a minute, I know these words. How do I know this song? And I realized that that was something that I had heard growing up. So that made a connection to me. And because we have the cultural Jewish aspect, it was just basically now bringing to fruition one side of me that had been kind of dormant religiously. So, we had this cultural make latkes and light the menorah, but now it was just, we're going to add on all the other holidays
So it sounds
start
like,
really doing Shabbat.
It sounds like your mother are both your parents Jewish?
So my biological father is not, my stepfather is, and my mother converted. So
okay.
Yeah.
How old
So
was she?
converted not through Messianic Judaism.
No.
correct.
Oh,
Through
okay.
Orthodox
Wow.
Judaism. Yeah.
Through Orthodox. Okay.
Back
All right.
in the day when they weren't asking questions, really.
Right. Yeah, they're a lot more
Yes.
rigorous, I guess, maybe now.
And I think part of the reason why they didn't have such a big deal about her conversion was because she was married to the son of a Sabra. So they saw it very much as like a completion of making the family a whole Jewish unit.
Right.
Of course.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Right. They tend not to object as much for sure when it's unifying that family identity.
Yeah.
And Jude, what about for you?
So my background is, I'm Jewish, but we were nowhere near Judaism at the time that we got involved with Messianic Judaism. We were kind of nominal Catholic for a time, and then Presbyterian, all sorts of things. But even going farther back, my parents are ex-hippies from the 60s.
Yay!
So, yeah, I know.
All
You have
right.
that background too.
But the granola ones,
Oh.
not the smoking ones.
Well, we were
Got it.
granola and smoking, but we didn't smoke the granola.
So, yeah, I'm originally from upstate New York, very close to where Woodstock was. Or
Oh
is.
my gosh.
Okay.
Yeah, I had my uncle went to Woodstock and all this craziness, and my parents were definitely hippies. My mom was very into New Age for quite a number of years.
Okay.
Kind of on the milder side of New Age, but it gets crazier, I know. But anyway, very involved in that. And what happened was there was a church here where we live in the city that was very, I guess it was, you could say, pro-Israel. Very pro-Israel. At that time, it was, the whole Christian Zionist movement. And so my family kind of started there through a friend and kind of got hooked. And then very soon after, we heard about a Messianic synagogue in town. And at the very first Passover Seder my parents went to, my dad accepted Yeshua. And it just went from there really quickly.
Wow.
And dropped everything and started in this crazy Messianic Jewish life and have never looked back. But, in 35 years, there's been a lot of changes in Messianic Judaism, which I know we're going to probably talk about a lot of things.
We are,
but yeah, I mean, the movement, if you could call it that, has evolved a lot in the last 35, 40 years. So we've kind of seen a lot, having been in it since we were teenagers, and now I guess we're middle-aged. Yeah, so middle-aged.
Yeah.
I thought I was middle-aged. Wait a minute.
I am kind of curious. So both of you, it was really like the whole family coming.
Yes.
Did you enjoy it? when you were young. Did you
Yes.
enjoy Messianic Judaism? Yes?
Yes.
That was a
Absolutely.
very quick yes for both of you.
Well,
Okay.
what
all
did
right.
you enjoy? I mean, I think as with us, we're always looking for ways to engage the young people. What did you enjoy about it as young people?
Well,
Did they have a
okay, so
youth group?
it was a small congregation.
It was very small.
There was a small youth group. We were most of it. But for me, I can answer for me, and this kind of goes into what we're going to be talking about. There was this excitement about what the Lord is doing within the Jewish people, right? And,
Yeah.
Yes.
and very much tied to eschatology and the end of days and things. And I wouldn't say I was obsessed about it, but it was at that time in the late 80s and early 90s, there was this excitement about it. Not that there isn't now, but it was kind of like this is a fulfillment of all that the Lord has been doing 2,000 years. Jerusalem was back in Jewish hands, and there was just this excitement within Messianic Judaism at the time that was very much like we're getting on board with something that is going to transform the world. And I still believe it's going to transform the world.
Absolutely.
But
Yes.
I think there was just this excitement about being part of this frontline thing that's happening.
So for me, it was different. For me, it was more of a, like I said, really tapping into that part of my heritage that had been kind of dormant. So I had, I could sing all the hymns. I had a, solid Bible understanding, my knowledge of who I was as a believer and my Bible knowledge and who Yeshua was, that was solid. So for me in my teenage years, it was all about learning now what being Jewish meant and learning about Judaism. So for me, it was less about the end time stuff and more about what does it mean to be Jewish. So I think slightly different for the two of us.
It's really interesting because it really does capture. I'm sure there's many other reasons why people get excited about Messianic Judaism or come into it. But that to me is really interesting because I still think that both of those are main reasons why we see people be involved in the movement, right? You have people coming who maybe have been raised nominally Jewish and they're seeing this real connection of their Jewish identity and Messiah faith, and they want it all to be unified. And then there are people that are like, man, this is the fulfillment of all things. We're living at the very end of the age.
Wow.
And I do feel like that too. So then could you walk us through maybe a little bit of the years after that? So you start coming. Did you have either of you aspirations towards leadership within the movement? Kind of take us through that next little part of the journey.
Yeah. So at first, no, we didn't ever think we would get into ministry like we're in today, congregational ministry. We met really through the music ministry in our congregation. And we're both musicians. We both play, instruments, and we have a love for music. So we sort of bonded originally over that, in a sense. We were very involved in the music ministry. And for years and years, I just thought that would be, personally for me, my contribution. I would get a job, and I did get a job. I'm by trade, I'm an accountant. So, I got my degree. I worked in accounting for over 20 years, and I thought maybe one day, if God willing, I'll become, maybe a deacon or an elder or something. But I never thought that I would go into ministry, at least for probably the first 15 years. So,
Yeah.
What do you think?
And I was also involved in praise and worship, and would have the baby. A week later, I'm back playing piano. The
Right.
baby's in the, the little thing on the floor next to me. We were just content with that. Of course, getting involved with Bible studies and teaching. For me, I would say I did early on really start taking on we wanted to start a B'nai Mitzvah program, and so I researched it and developed it, and I was in charge of that, and then sisterhood stuff, and then just teachings about foundations of the different holidays, the biblical meanings, the spiritual understanding. So that really fed my soul, is that teaching aspect of things. And so I did stuff like that, but it was never like, oh, it's just like, oh, I'm gonna do a little Bible study, I'll do this, you know. And then one day Jude said,
well, what happened was, this is going back over 20 years now, is we were living in another state, okay? And we were...
Wait, so you're still commuting back to that original community then?
No, so through a series of events, so life happened,
Okay.
we were going on and on with life. Because of my job and everything, we ended up moving our family, our young family at the time, to another
like
state.
6 or 8 years into our marriage.
Yeah.
Okay,
We moved to another state, yeah.
And, you
But
know,
they
life,
had a Messianic community as well.
Yes,
Yes.
a very well established one.
Okay.
yes. And we were there, we were in that community. And I remember I was raking the leaves one day and just really praying to the Lord, you know, because we just weren't settled. We didn't feel like this was the last place we would be. And, you know, we knew God was doing something, but we couldn't put our finger on it. And I was just praying one day and just asking God, what do you want and where do you want us? And this is the only time I've ever heard an audible voice, the voice of God. And it was only one time in my life, and it was this time.
And it wasn't a profound thing that he said.
But it wasn't profound. It was just simply, because the question I asked was, where do you want us? Mm-hmm. And he said the name of the county that we're in now, and the name of the congregation that we're in now. That's what he said.
Amazing. Praise God.
Like,
But I mean, that
verbally.
is profound.
It
Yes,
is profound.
that is.
Yeah, that's
It
right.
really
Simple.
is.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of like from that time on, it was like, okay, we're supposed to go back.
But then it took us like another year,
It took us almost
to
a
finally
year.
get a job and be able to move back.
But even then, after that, it took another 4 years after we were settled back here, where we are here, that God really called me into ministry. Through my job, I was working at a manufacturing plant here, and things were happening. They were closing another plant in another state, and I was commuting, and things were kind of up in the air with my career. And the Lord started impressing upon us about ministry, and the calling for ministry started happening then. I know I'm doing a lot of there's a lot between there, but
of course.
Then it took another 4 years for me to become the assistant leader of the congregation. So it took a while, even after the Lord called me. We moved back, and then it all happened.
2012.
2012.
I wanted to ask, did you get some training then? Did you go into yeshiva at all at that point? When did you begin that?
So I
Sorry,
I
if
did
it
a lot of
interrupts.
reading
Yeah.
on my own.
Yeah.
You can see some of the books behind me.
Yes, I see.
I would always just sort of absorb, Messianic stuff or Jewish stuff. But for me, our congregation was part of the Alliance, the Messianic Jewish Alliance, for many, many, many years. And
So this is the one back where you are now.
Yes,
So
the
where
one
you,
Oh,
where
okay.
you started, and also where you are now.
Yes.
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
This congregation was an Alliance congregation, and I ended up getting ordained, going through the ordination process for the Messianic Jewish Alliance, okay, or their congregational wing, okay. And I was ordained for a few years there. So yes, the answer to your question, I got that training, but it was many years later, after we started moving more towards the union, that we became a member of the union several years ago now, and I started the yeshiva. I went to Netzer David.
Netzer David,
And
okay.
It was really when I started yeshiva that the education happened, okay? Because I went through, I'm ordained by the union, and so I'm really learning all of these things. Now, remember, we had been in Messianic Judaism for years, and, culturally we understood everything, but going to yeshiva really solidified my understanding of what it means to be Jewish and what it means to be a rabbi, okay?
Right.
And all that entails. And so I guess the answer to the question is I've had education all along the way, ultimately
Informal.
but then the yeshiva education and the ordination with the union was really the capstone for me for the education that I have now.
Okay.
Yeah. I've been through some MJTI classes. I'm on the 20-year plan for getting my smicha. But you're right. It begins an internal shift of mindset,
Yes, it does.
really, as you begin learning from these other rabbis who've been part of the movement for so long and have been so diligent about wrestling with all the traditional forms of Judaism and what is meaningful for us to take forward in our body ministry. But what were you going to say, Mom?
Well, I was wondering where Jennifer was at that point, because I know for me, when my husband began yeshiva, I kind of did it with him. I just did. I mean, I was more like you, Judah, in what you said about, I just was hungry. I wanted to know more about it. I am not Jewish as far as I know. I was not raised with any of that. It's I'm not going to say as far from as possible, but I was Baptist. Learned a lot of scripture, but when he would learn, I would study with him. There might be 5 books required for the course. I'd read a couple of them. And then I began taking the actual classes myself and then finished the Madrika program. But what were you doing, Jennifer? I mean, I'm assuming that you were kind of right in there too.
So we have 6 children.
Okay. Yes. There you go.
You beat
Thank
us.
you.
You beat us. We have 5.
Yeah. Well
I
said.
got to get one more now. We have to do one more. Okay.
Yeah. So our oldest is 25 and our youngest is 15.
Yes.
So when Jude started in 2020, well, first of all, I had been doing a lot of, as much as you had done, you were very involved in your secular job. I mean, his secular job was intense. And,
I can imagine.
So he didn't really have a lot of time at that point, like, between trying to be a husband, trying to do the job, trying to be a father. There was no time for doing extra learning at that point in time. So
Totally
during
understand,
those points, I was doing reading and, my spare time and all that stuff. And when we came back, because we didn't mention that we did then go in 2016 to Savannah.
Right.
Oh.
So 2016.
2014.
Oh, 2014. 2014, we moved to Savannah and planted a congregation there.
Well,
So,
was this through the MJAA or the UMJC?
Through the MJAA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when we were there, we got that all up and running and learned all that. But once again, his job was super intense there. And he was trying to do that, trying to run the congregation, getting to the point where he was like, I don't know
Totally.
how much longer I can do this.
Yep.
And I said, well, God's got it under control. And that's when we got a call from the senior rabbi at the congregation that we grew up in, that we're at now,
Wow.
saying, I'm interested in retiring. Do you want to come back?
Oh,
And
wow.
so we said, absolutely. And so it was in 2019 that we moved back. And I kept saying to him, I said, you really need to pursue UMJC ordination. Because by that time we were looking at becoming members of the UMJC and doing dual membership. And I knew how robust the yeshiva thing was, and I said, you have to do it. You owe it to yourself. You owe it to the congregation. As much as you've done of your own learning, I know it's just not a drop in the bucket compared to what you would learn through the yeshiva. And so finally in 2020, he started taking classes. So when he started taking classes, he was taking like 2 a semester, and he would basically spend every evening either attending a class or reading the books or writing the papers, and it was like every free moment he had. So I was holding down dishes, cooking, kids, teenagers who needed to talk at 11 o'clock at night.
Why is it always 11 o'clock at night?
Yeah.
I know.
Man. Yeah, it's amazing.
Which is fine for me because I'm the night person. So he would pass out. He had done all the reading, he'd pass out, and I'd be handling teenagers. So I wasn't able to study along with him. Although he would say, "Oh, here's this thing that I read," and we would talk about it. And so I knew what he was learning. Conceptually, I had kind of already personally wrestled with a lot of the stuff as far as there is like a philosophical, theological difference between MJAA and UMJC understanding of what Messianic Judaism
really want to
should be.
explore that.
We will
in a
explore
moment.
that one.
We'll get there. We're going to explore
So
that.
I had already already personally kind of gone through that and done that. And so for me, it wasn't as like earth shattering, but for him, he'd read and he'd be like, oh my gosh, you have to hear this. And I'd be like, yes, that's great. I love that. But now that he's finished, I'm starting to, I started last fall taking classes, and I'm actually pursuing smicha. So I'm about halfway there.
Okay.
So now's my time. Now he handles dinner, dishes, so I can go and do my reading and classes and all that stuff.
And the 11 o'clock conversations.
I still have to handle those.
Those are still.
I still fall asleep.
Yeah, he can't hang. He can't
You got a
hang. It's
biological clock, right? It goes to sleep, right?
I'm a morning person.
Yeah.
I understand.
Well, I'm
So
an evening person.
I am kind of curious about that. You said at the beginning, so this community where you guys started as kids, and then you had your adventures, and you ended up back as the senior rabbi, as the senior leader.
Right.
Was an MJAA congregation always?
Yes.
Okay.
Always.
It had been actually like founded like from its very beginning by MJAA members. Okay.
Correct.
And then you said you at some point pursued dual membership, and there are a couple of other congregations that I know that have pursued dual membership in both the UMJC and the MJAA. I have very limited experience with the MJAA. 1 year when I was vice president of the union, I went to the summer conference for the MJAA. I was like the official delegate, like, hey guys, we love you so much. And I still remember it was like culturally very different. I mean, it was just a very different expression of Messianic Judaism. I have like my own opinions about like why that is. I think there's a lot of strong personalities in the MJAA. It was very personality, individual driven, maybe. I don't know. But you guys grew up in it, so you would have more of an idea. So I'm curious why. Why and did the previous rabbi who was wanting to hand off the community to you, did he see that also? Or was that something you pursued as you went into leadership?
So it was a gradual process. This was like many years. Way back in 2018 or so, we were invited to a delegates meeting of the UMJC.
Okay. Great.
So we got to, and I think that was when you were vice president, if I recall.
Yes.
Really?
Okay. All right.
We know when that was.
It was very eye-opening because I think there's a lot of differences culturally. I don't want to say spiritually, but expression-wise, culturally, but also the way that both organizations are structured.
Right.
And from an accountant, I'm an accountant and finance manager background. The way that the organizations are run as a business is very different. And so coming to the delegate meeting and seeing the very, what's the best word to describe it?
Transparency.
Very horizontal. You know, everything is decided upon as a delegates together. And that was very different because, you know, in a lot of organizations, it's very leader specific or centric.
Right.
And
well,
so,
especially in Messianic Judaism.
Right.
yes.
Many of the communities, whether they were MJAA or UMJC, were started by strong families, right? And they were often the leaders, and they would be either the head elder or the rabbi or both, depending on the structure. So, yeah, I totally get that.
Exactly. So going from that delegate meeting and just starting to make friendships, because, you know, I think people don't realize that Messianic Judaism is this phrase, but there's a lot of things within it. You know,
Right.
you've got Chosen People and Jews for Jesus. You've got the MJAA, the Alliance. You've got Tikkun, and we kind of operate in our little bubbles in a lot of ways. So our culture was very much MJAA, which has a distinct culture. But gradually, as we got in tune with a lot of other congregations and leaders, we really liked the philosophy, certainly the emphasis on theology and scholarship. And so that really drew us to it. And I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit more. But, you know, just the way forward for Messianic Judaism to me and to Jen, we feel very strongly that we have a responsibility to do everything we can while we're involved as leaders to prepare the next generation.
Thank you.
It's not
Yes,
about us,
absolutely.
it's about what's coming
Right.
after us. And so, how are we going to create a healthy and mature Messianic Judaism? And I started thinking of all these things, and combining that with going to yeshiva and the UMJC and all of these things, it just made a lot of sense for us to align with the union, to the point where we, soon after entering the union, we just, we sent our letter of resignation into the alliance, thank you very much, but we feel more aligned with the union and where the union is going and how the union is culturally and otherwise. So
Did that
I know that's a really
require-
broad thing, but
Did that require a vote within your congregation? Because you were in mass moving the congregation, basically, right? So how did that play out? I mean, were they okay about that?
Well, so that's a story.
Yep. Yeah.
So remember, we were an MJAA congregation,
Right.
Yeah.
where the power is centralized at the top.
Right.
And so
For example, I remember when we entered the union,
Okay.
I got together with Rabbi Russ
Right.
Resnick,
because you have to submit your bylaws.
because we had to submit our bylaws.
Right.
And our bylaws, were kind of copy-paste from other congregations where we were at the time, which was Alliance. And he was like, well, you should probably change this and change this and change. So we're a lot more elder-run than we were before. Okay? And so,
Okay.
but at the time, at the time, I've, as the rabbi, I'm one of the elders.
Right.
The
Josh is
existing
too. It's a
elders.
distinction. That's the specific
Yeah.
distinction we have
Right.
too. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And at the time, we had a couple of other elders in place. And I went through the whole thing with them. I kind of sold them on it all, and they bought in. And to a lot of extent, the congregation bought in.
But practically speaking, boots on the ground, at that point in time when we were making the switch, it really didn't mean a whole lot to the congregation. Like, we never told them, don't go to MJAA stuff now, or because, we're very close to places where they have a lot of MJAA conferences and stuff. So, people still go to that, and we've never said don't go to it.
Right.
So in a practical sense, it really, making the shift from an MJAA congregation to a UMJC congregation, because the MJAA really has nothing to do with congregations. It didn't mean any difference to our congregants.
So the way you conducted business and the way you just kind of kept going forward in the way you did things within the congregation, right? So they might not have even seen, it was pretty seamless, it sounds like.
Right.
It was initially. And one of the other things that was happening at the time was COVID. So
Okay.
COVID kind of course, froze everything. And we were just, as everybody was, just trying to get through
That's right.
and make sense of it all. And so we were all immersed with dealing with COVID and our congregation. So that sort of delayed things for a couple of years. But after COVID subsided is when, and subsequently I'm knee deep in yeshiva, right? At the time, we started moving the congregation more liturgically. Jen can really speak to that because she was spearheading a lot of that. We were really moving more to a Siddur-driven liturgical congregation that really was more representatively Jewish. Okay, and that is when we started seeing quite a few people, for various reasons, say, "Yeah, this is not what I want." And so we did have a lot of people leave over the last few years.
Okay.
Well, I'm curious about, I think, two things out of that. One is what was, I'm not trying to throw shade at the MJAA at all. Like I know many of those leaders and love them. Like it's not about that. But I'm curious, what were some of those distinctions that for you were like, we really feel more aligned with UMJC? If we could be a little bit more concrete about that. And then I know that as we also began to, and actually it was around COVID time, began to really investigate our own purpose statement as a community and look at like practically what we were versus what we believe God had called us to be. We also began aligning ourselves much more with like traditional Siddur, Shachrit service, which ours is still, I would say, within the UMJC, not as liturgically heavy as others. And we still do things like we read the English translations of some of our prayers, because we really want people to understand. Not everybody is fluent in Hebrew. So, like, there was a shifting for us also, and it really shook our community. Like, we had many people who felt like, we had people that thought that we didn't value Gentiles anymore. And they thought we were trying to get rid of all Gentiles out of our community, which is not at all true. It's not what we were trying to do at all. But we were trying to say a focus of our community is for these Jewish and intermarried families to have a Jewish space where they can raise Jewish kids and pass this on. We need some sort of solidity. And there has to then be a halakha for Jewish identity within our community. And we actually have to adhere to it. And it has to mean something. Like there has to be maybe some differences between how Jewish people and Gentiles worship even on a Shabbat morning. And even that was hard, especially here in California. People are not really fans of distinction. Like they want, like, whatever I want to do on a Saturday morning, I should be able to do. And it's like... maybe, but not here. So if we could go back to the first part, maybe some of the distinctions that you guys saw between the MJAA and the UMJC, some of it might just be your temperament and your inclination, but I do think that there is a desire for a stable Jewish reality that can be transmitted door to door in the UMJC. And that really means something to me. And you spoke to that just a little bit, but if we could start there and then maybe go into some of the practical changes that were an outworking of it.
Can I
Yes,
take this?
I was going to suggest you go first, yeah.
So I would say that our move out of MJAA and into the UMJC was actually less about their philosophical or theological way of doing things, or the fact that we, didn't agree, like you said, it was a culture shock when you went to an MJAA conference. It was less about us saying, oh, we don't like the expression of Messianic Judaism that we see in the MJAA, and more just us having issues with the way the organization was run, the lack of transparency. And so that was our uncomfortable point, which made us feel more comfortable with the union. So we made that switch for primarily that reason. And then as we're, as Jude's going through yeshiva, first of all, very early on, we came from a congregation that the mission or vision statement was bringing the good news of the Jewish people of blah, blah, blah county that we were in. And I remember saying very young, early 20s, saying, well, I'm not opposed to Jewish people, becoming believers and knowing Messiah, but I am not sitting in this building only for Jewish people to walk in and hear the good news of Messiah. I'm here because this is my place to worship and my expression as a Jewish person and my place, where I want to have community. So I think is a fundamental difference in how most MJAA congregations view the purpose of their congregational space and activities versus UMJC. Like you said, Lador Vador, we're about in the UMJC really an expression of Jewish life and passing it on to our children. Yeah. That is not necessarily the emphasis. And as we've gone further and further from the MJAA, you can see more and more shades of how I put it, that there's just a lot more church influence that has become standardized and wrapped into the general culture of MJAA, that now just becomes that people just say, well, that's Messianic. And really, actually, if you look at it, the roots of it, it's very churchy.
Sure.
So
I'm curious when you say not really being passed on within MJA communities, and I mean, obviously it's a broad statement, but are you talking about like not having bar and bat mitzvahs, or are you talking about the service, like the shachrit service on a Saturday morning feels like you're going into a Jewish flavored church versus a synagogue?
So I didn't know the word shachrit before I was exposed to Jude's yeshiva stuff and was in the UMJC. So I had grown up within MJAA, Messianic Judaism, and didn't even know what the word shachrit really meant. So that to me, now looking back, I'm like, how in the, like that's
an
a
indicator.
problem.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Sure.
So if I could jump in. So I think that there is a very much a missional mindset that we do see, obviously, with evangelical Christianity, and it is very much the case of the Messianic Judaism we grew up in, which is there is such an emphasis not only on eschatology, but really reaching Jewish people with the gospel, which there's nothing wrong with that, and we still do that, but almost to the exclusion of
Jewish community,
understanding what it means to be Jewish. So it's a missional mindset versus more of the whole bilateral mindset that we see a lot in the Union. And we're Jewish, and it's Judaism with Yeshua versus a Messianic church kind of mentality. That, and also with the ever-growing Hebrew roots movement.
Oh, goodness.
It's very important to be very clear about distinction.
It is.
And what you believe and what you don't believe, because if you don't, you're just going to get engulfed by a lot of that.
So we've talked about actually the explosion of the Hebrew roots movement within MJAA, because that's where most of our lives were lived until recently. And talking about how when we were teenagers and we first came in, really hearing when a Gentile would come into our congregation, it would be talked about how they had the heart of Ruth, how that was a very specific calling. Not all Gentiles felt that way. You know, you're so welcome here to join us. This is so fabulous, blah, blah, blah. But it was seen as more of like a one-off thing. And there was really a shift, I would say, around 95, 96, when there just started becoming more and more Gentiles coming in. And so then it was left to, well, how do we explain all of these Gentiles who are coming? And how do we, like, rationalize that? And then the talking points became, well, this is an indication of the end times, because in the end, all people will be basically Messianic. That's, you know, they said that without saying it. And so,
well, and there's that term, Messianic versus Messianic Jewish.
Right.
Messianic Judaism.
So because all people will be doing this,
right.
That's why God's calling them now. And this is an indication that this is the beginning of the end times.
Interesting.
So that logic then trickles down from the top to your local congregation, and now every Jew or every Gentile that comes in, who's coming in because, oh, I read about Shabbat, my pastor doesn't teach about Shabbat, and so you do Shabbat, so I'm coming here. They're not called for the heart of Ruth. They're not called because they're called to the Jewish people. They're coming because they want Shabbat and the holidays, and the only place that does it is the local Messianic Jewish place.
Yeah,
Right.
well
So they
said.
could care less whether there are Jews there.
Right.
And
that
so,
changes your culture drastically.
Yes, drastically.
Absolutely. Well,
So-
can I ask about those Gentiles coming in? Were they then putting on talit? Were they doing?
yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that's what. Yeah. So they had all the trappings as if they were becoming.
It becomes
Jews.
a de facto conversion. It becomes a
right.
usurpation.
Yeah.
Really.
It's a one
It's-
law, and
Yeah.
David Rudolph has a great paper about it. We
Yeah.
were, in essence, basically a soft one law congregation where
Right.
you say, well, not everybody is doing it now, but God's intention was for everybody to do this. So you Gentiles that are coming and doing this with us, you're actually following what God intended to happen, because the church
Right.
should never have split from Messianic Judaism. So that was, in essence, the congregation
Interesting.
that we were in. And, you know,
Yeah.
Did you know when you were young that that's what it was?
No, we didn't have terms for that.
Yeah, well,
Right? Yeah, it feels to me like
Yeah.
when the internet exploded,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That was when our community also, you talked about it maybe mid-90s.
Mid-90s,
same,
right.
Like in the mid-90s, we had a website. And that meant that we were a much bigger community, but it was all Gentiles. And I don't know if you guys have ever read Rabbi Dowerman's paper on the 7 reasons or 8 reasons why Gentiles come to Messianic congregations, in which he breaks
Send that
them
to
down
us.
by, I will send that to you. He breaks it down by different psychological motivations, a sense of superiority to the local church, a sense of almost like a Seventh-day Adventist mindset of like, this is the right way to worship, these are the only people doing it correctly. There are the ones that are really looking for value and meaning because they feel like the Jewish people are chosen, right? So anyways, we saw that same thing also, and like you're saying, we didn't have terms for that. We didn't understand, and I don't think in the union either, like when it was in the 90s and the early 2000s, because there was just such a wave. I don't think that people really had a way to explain it. And I remember reading somebody's paper, oh goodness, or maybe it was a book or like a small book, but like Messianic Judaism, Who Sold This Business to the Gentiles, or something like that. And I forget who was the author. I forget which rabbi it was that was the author of it. But it was just a pragmatic, like, guys, here's the statistics in Northern America of Jews versus Gentiles in Messianic Judaism. How are we calling this Judaism? Like, at all? Like, is it aligned at all with our Jewish people? It was really, to me, it was things like that that really pushed me, and it gave voice to something that I felt as a kid growing up in Messianic Judaism. And if I could just, I'm sorry, I'm a yapper, but it was really, really hard for me to wear a talit. It was really, really hard for me to make Aliyah to Torah. It was really, really hard for me to engage in Jewish practice because everybody was doing it. It didn't seem to mean anything.
There wasn't
like
distinction.
A bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah didn't mean anything because we also had bar and bat Avrahams for Gentile kids, and then they would wear a talit, and then like it was like, so what are we? Like if there is no distinction anymore, and so like I understand what you guys are talking about. I felt it too. We didn't have words for it either until I think much later, and I think maybe some of it was as these movements. One Law, Ephraimite, Two House, Hebrew Roots, like as they became more formalized and they started putting out their own papers, like this is who we are, that became like, oh, that's what we're not. We are not that.
Right.
Like that's not okay. So as you guys like began seeing that, because that was part of the transition maybe, I guess, between that mentality of the MJAA and the UMJC, was it like gradual baby steps within the community you were leading? Like, hey, we need to get things more aligned? Or was it at some point like you're taking a lot of yeshiva? At some point, was it just like, oh, no, like we just need to have like a sit down and everybody get out of the pool, and this is why we exist. And now, if you want to be back in the pool, what was it like for you guys?
So I think it was a number of things. I'm going to start with I think it really started back at our Savannah congregation when we were looking at like, what are we going to talk about in a new members class? And we took a very, very hard line against Hebrew roots. Like, if you're Gentile, that's great, but you can't be Hebrew roots. You can't be here because you're bashing the church. You can't be here because church is bad.
Right.
We came from a congregation that was nobody should be doing church, or not church, nobody should be doing Christmas. And when we had our congregation in Savannah, we said, you can do Christmas if you want. We don't care. And like, if you're Jewish and you have family that does Christmas, go by all means, go and celebrate Christmas with them. Because what's more important is family relationship. So we started out there recognizing that, church doesn't equal bad. And then I think it really transferred when we came, back here.
Yeah.
It started really more solidifying for you on that end. You want to pick that up?
Yeah, it did. So for me, it was kind of like philosophically and whatever. Like
You were deconstructing.
Yeah, it was good deconstruction.
Yes, it was.
Right. It's healthy. Yeah, sure.
It is, and I think it's interesting because both organizations, the MJAA and the Union, they actually, at the very high levels, they're not One Law or Hebrew Roots. They actually have position papers against it.
Exactly.
But on the ground,
in actual congregations,
it was a different story.
Totally.
And so for me, it was kind of like, where are we going with this? You brought up statistics a few minutes ago about Gentiles to Jews. And, look, there's a lot of Gentiles and maybe a little bit of Jews in a lot of Messianic synagogues. But the issue was, what's going to happen in a generation from now or
Amen.
2 generations from now? Is it still going to be a Messianic synagogue, or is it going to literally be Hebrew roots? Because as you dilute more and more, and there's less Jewish people in leadership and otherwise, what do you really have? And the whole essence of the Hebrew Roots One Law is that Gentiles thinking we can do everything that the Jews do, to the point where why do you need Jews? Yeah,
exactly.
It becomes oddly enough its own form of replacement theology.
absolutely.
Isn't that
If
crazy?
you really take it to its logical end.
Yes.
And so, like, I see people that are like, they'll come and visit Gentiles and they'll be angry about the replacement theology of the church, and then they'll want to put on a talit. And I'm like, so don't you see the logical end of that? Like, if there is no distinction between the nations and Israel, which is absurd if you read through the Tanakh, if there is no distinction there, then there's no point in having Jews anymore. What are we laboring for? Why are we working so hard to share the Besorah with Jewish people if it doesn't really matter? Like, if they're just, they can find it in a church. Like, who cares? But there's this passing on of the prophetic destiny of Jews, which I know it sounds grandiose or whatever, but there is some. Like, we have to wrestle with aliyah. We have to wrestle with, should we be outside the land? We should be wrestling with whether or not our kids marry other Jews and are going to have Jews, and like, are they going to understand the call that is? It's not just another ethnicity. And when you're surrounded by so much mushagas, where it's like you have no idea what's happening, it's so hard to hold on to those. Certainly for young people, it can become very hard to hold on to those. I wonder, as you guys, as you transitioned then, so you're saying it was gradual? Was it like smaller steps, kind of? That was the first step, maybe, was like, we are not a Hebraic roots community. That's a line. We're just going to have a line there. Like, for example, we upset a good chunk of our community by our elders met for some point for 2 years before we decided on a formal halakha for Jewish identity. That you had to have identifiable evidence, like tangible evidence of a Jewish grandparent. Like, we didn't care if it was patrilineal or matrilineal, and we were going to adhere to that. Like, those were the people who could make aliyah to Torah. Those were the ones who could be bar mitzvah. Those were the ones, and that was very hard for our community.
It was very hard.
So, were there other steps for you guys that were similar, maybe, to that we are not Hebraic roots?
Yeah, even though we put that in when we were in Savannah, we still allowed Gentiles to wear talits, and so it was like, well,
isn't that a hard conversation? Golly,
It is.
well, we're like, you can do this, you just have to know what you're doing, you have to, that type of thing. So I think it was the real changes happened when we came back, because the congregation in Savannah had our DNA to it since we started it, so it wasn't quite so weird, because
it's fair to call it weird. It is fair.
So then we came back to our congregation of our childhood, and all those crazy zany people were here, and so
it was the process. I mean, there was several years where we introduced. Well, first of all, we introduced a siddur. We had a siddur, but it was the siddur in Messianic Judaism everybody used for years and years and years, and you did some prayers, but they were sort of out of place. And for us, we picked a siddur, and we really structured the service around the siddur. And one of the big things we did, which is like, I guess it was really the no-no, is a lot of congregations, most congregations, they'll take like the Aaronic blessing, because it's a source of blessing, and they put it at the end of the service to kind of almost like a doxology and to guide you out. We
still do that, by the way. But we're not offended that you've changed that. No. That is not where it is in the Shakri service.
Let me explain the thinking behind this.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Go for it.
So what actually led us to adopt a siddur was we had originally had a set of siddurs, basically have PowerPoints with everything on them, so people weren't really using the siddurs. And I said, well, this is such a Jewish thing to use a siddur. We've got to go back to a siddur thing. And we had to get a new siddur because the one we were using was out of date. We didn't really like it anyway, and so we actually use the boot off siddur now. So.
That's true.
We, in doing that, and this was all because we went to the UMJC summer conference in North Carolina, and they had the Dorot Task Force, and they talked about what are the things that keep kids from leaving Messianic Judaism or Judaism in general for Messianic
I remember
Jewish
that one.
kids.
Yeah.
Yep, and talking about going on a trip to Israel, summer camps, and there was one other thing that I don't remember. But literally because of that, the very next summer we signed our kids up for Camp Orlador. The 3 kids that were still eligible to be campers, we signed them up. And our kids came back from camp and they said, Mom and Dad, we went to camp thinking we knew the prayers, we knew liturgy. We go to service every single week. And we...
My kids too.
And they said,
and we had
knew
no
nothing.
idea.
Yeah, they're like, we
Same.
knew nothing. And then they said, why didn't we do these other things? Why did we not do this liturgy? Why do we not know it? And I looked at my kid and I said, because I don't know it. Because we never did this.
Right.
We never had this growing up. So I said, we need to learn these things and we need to start putting them into place. So summer 22, they went to camp. The first Shabbat after Simchat Torah, actually it was the second one because the first one you did a teaching on the siddur, but we had this big campaign. We encouraged people to pre-order their siddurs. Jude had a teaching on the siddur and the different things of liturgy, and we had added some pieces of liturgy in the congregation prior to that, so it was already a little bit more than what was there when we came back. But when we rolled it out, there was a little bit more, and everybody was excited. There was a little fear, but everyone was pretty much excited. But one of the things we said was, I said, we have got to find a way to stop this whole, everybody puts the talit over the head. It becomes this big weird thing where the talit is this mystical symbol of God's blessing upon the family. And as I was going through the siddur to go, okay, we would go through and go, wait a minute, that's not where we do Vashamru. We're doing it in the completely wrong. It was such an eye-opening thing for us. And this is concurrent with you taking classes on the structure of the siddur and yeshiva.
Yeah.
So,
Still do Matovu completely in the wrong place. So it's like a gradual process for us too. But keep going. Sorry.
Yeah.
So when I saw that the Aaronic benediction was in the middle of the Shemona Esrei, I said, we've got to move it. So let's move it. And by moving it, we're not going to make it a big stop the service. Everybody put your talit over your family. We're just going to do it, and we're going to keep rolling.
Right.
And actually by doing that, I looked out this service and there was literally only one person that put it up over their head. Nobody does it now we didn't even have to say, don't put your talit over your head, don't do this, da, da, da. We just did not make it a big thing. And so now the talit is no longer this mystical object that confers God's blessing upon you and your entire household. It becomes now simply what it was meant to be, which is a garment in which the tzitziot are on. And so now it's easier to say, because if you're in a congregation where Gentiles and Jews are all wearing talits, and your Aaronic blessing is at the end, and everybody puts the talit over the head, and then you say to all the Gentiles, well, you can't wear a talit. What you're in essence saying is, you do not get to confer the blessing of the Lord upon you and your family.
Yeah.
And so if you remove that from there, it's so much easier. So we moved it first so that by the time we had that talk where Jude was like, all right, this is how it's going to be and blah, 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 it wasn't really an issue as much.
And
Are you talking about the talit talk?
Yes.
Yeah. Let me just say, this whole thing about, the talit and the different distinction things, everything we try to do is is with love. You sit down with them,
of course.
in love, because a lot of it is we didn't know. We thought this is what the talit is, to use this example, and the blessings and all this stuff. But when you really kind of say, well, this is what the garment is for, This is what it's not for. And you educate with love. 99% of the time, people understand. And I will say, we do have a grandfather clause, which I know many people do. If you've been coming to our congregation for 20 years and you've been putting that on and it's meaningful to you, we're not going to tell you, hey, take that off. That's, you're doing something wrong. We're gentle about it. We're loving about it. It's a gradual transition is what we're talking about.
Yeah. So we do have a number of congregants that are Gentile that still wear the talit because they were grandfathered in.
Yeah.
But
Well, do you
with
think
new
that's
people,
confusing for people coming in? I mean, normally when I would go into a congregation, I would say, hey, talit equals Jewish. So is that confusing? Does that confuse visitors coming in at all?
may.
Yeah.
I think it's a total of maybe 3 guys. I think it's
Okay.
like 3 guys that do it. And we consulted with rabbinic authorities. And we said, how are we going to handle this? What's the right way to do this? Do we ask them to remove it? Do we? And we were told, under no terms do you ask those people who have been doing it for years to not do it anymore. Because then you are shaming them. And as Jewish people, we don't do that.
That's an interesting
Yeah.
point.
Oh, wow.
Right.
So
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Wow.
I think that's far more understanding and loving than I was, unfortunately, for some of our transition, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
So that gives me good perspective and something to reflect on as we continue to move forward. I appreciate that a lot. That's good.
Well, I know our goodbye has dealt with people coming up to read from Torah or whatever, and they've asked, if someone asked, do I wear the talit or whatever, she told one person who always wore his in the congregation who is not Jewish, who came with a Jewish man who didn't wear a talit, interestingly, but she said, when you come up to read, people will believe that you're Jewish if you're wearing the talit. So you're welcome to come up and read from the Brit Hadashah, basically, but don't wear your talit. That was expressed to that, at least that one person. I remember that. Yeah. And it was hard, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like the emphasis on it's all about love, and we certainly don't want anybody shamed. That absolutely not. Yeah.
We have found, too, that as people understood more and more that we were aligning ourselves with Jewish life and Jewish normative practice, some of those people did kind of self-select out of the community and went off and became parts of like One Law or Ephraimite communities. And so, that's hard too, especially when it was people that we've known and loved for a long time. Like you, I'm leading the community I grew up in. I only really left for a little while when Rosie and I were on the road with Jews for Jesus. We were part of the Liberated Wailing Wall for 3 years. And that was the only time we were really gone. And so it was difficult. It was difficult to see those people like leave. I will say, unfortunately, like the fruit of all of those One Law and Ephraimite communities that people have joined is like they divide and divide and divide. They get smaller and smaller. There's this divisiveness that seems to be present. It's like I don't know. And I do think some of it is because when you're founded on something that's fundamentally not true, I don't know if it has the same spirit. I don't know if it has the same spirit of God in it, and it's hard. Like we all want to hold our spiritual lives up to the Word and to God, and if there's anything wrong, please show us. Okay, so several years, kind of post-COVID, the gradual change. What are, as you look now at what your community has become, what are some places where you feel like, wow, that really led to some real health here, or this is some of the stuff that's going so well, or these are the things that have been real blessings because of that transition?
Let me piggyback off of what you just said, Josh. So I think we also have found that having people that come in that have this very like, church is bad, it's pagan, it creates this very us against them mentality.
Right.
And in this like spirit of judgmentalism. And, I'm better than you because I know more, because I understand more, because I'm doing this and I'm doing Shabbat better and I'm, more observant and this and that and the other. And that tends to be a lot more with the Gentile people that come out from this internet, Hebrew roots, One Law, all that stuff.
Dude, the internet. Boo. Al Gore,
Yeah.
come on. What were you thinking, man? Anyways, sorry.
So the congregation we came back to was very unhealthy in that respect. There was a lot of judgmentalism, a lot of us against them mentality, and it bled into the congregation.
Right.
So while
Yes.
there were some deep relationships that have been there for years, there was just this general nastiness. And
Yes. Right.
one of the things Jude's fundamentally just this great preacher who's about like, he's just very soft spoken but direct, and preaching about just really, you're a teacher, you're a really great teacher, but you're also really good about preaching fundamentals. And
That's good.
so we just really pulled it back. I mean, I can't tell you how many times people were like, when are you going to preach about Revelation? And we were like, never. Because we don't care when Yeshua is coming back, because if he's coming back and you all are being nasty to each other, then
Forget about it.
Who's being gathered? Who's being
Right.
gathered here? I don't know.
So I think that's one of the good fruits that have really come out of this, is that even though we've lost people and it's been deeply sad, the congregation that's left is way more healthy and way more unified, and there's so much more peace walking into the building for those of us
Yes.
in leadership and just for the general congregation.
Yes.
And there's just a real openness and welcoming attitude to what God wants us to learn and to understand, and how he wants us to grow as a community. It's been so beautiful. So beautiful.
Well, and let me just piggyback off of that just a little bit. For 2 straight years, we had our annual theme of the congregation, Chesed.
Okay.
We even had. Did we have a banner that says Chesed?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a banner that we put out, and it was basically like
It was the quote from Pirkei Avot.
it was a quote from Pirkei Avot, and it was just all about loving kindness and just loving each other. And really, that's the essence of being a believer. It's not when you know and you can pinpoint when Yeshua comes back and what are all the
That's right.
who's Gog and Magog and all this stuff. I mean, that's all good, but do we love each other?
How
Do
are we
love
loving
the
each
Lord?
other?
That's the fundamentals that we need to be stressing.
Because we talked about, we have to love each other as a community, and then that love should overflow into the greater community
Amen.
here.
Right.
So
Yeah.
so we really just took it back to grassroots. And there were some people that still were like not happy with that. And those people eventually just left. Like God just continued to trim away people that weren't in line with the vision for the congregation moving forward.
Yeah.
So essentially,
great,
you didn't
too,
ask
because
people
I
to
think-
leave. Yeah, I'm sorry. You didn't actually
Go
ever
ahead.
ask anyone to leave? Did that ever occur?
There was only a couple of instances, and they were disciplinary and
Got it.
really.
One
Yes.
exception, only one exception.
Yeah.
Right.
Everybody else left on their own.
Otherwise, they basically left on their
Okay.
own. We wanted everybody. My heart was everybody needs to stay. Everybody's going to get this. This is going to be great.
Yes, of
And
course.
That didn't happen.
Yeah, right. I do think that there's in all of those things. I'll send you Darman's paper on it. But in all of those things, many of them come down to real judgmentalism and holier than you sort of mentality, which really is expressing, I think, a deep spiritual need in the person of needing to know the love of Messiah and know that they're accepted and know that they're forgiven and know their value in the eyes of God. And like you said, having a healthy place, a Beit Shalom, to invite people into. So God willing, if a Jewish person who's wondering about this Yeshua, shows up in the building, what they experience is love, and what they experience is peace. And so then it's not like we're trying to win you theologically. It's interesting too.
Yes.
All of the generation of Messianic Judaism out of the 60s and 70s, and like the hippies and everything, they were, well, at least all of the ones that I've had conversations with, and I think especially of like Rabbi Schiffman, they were not won by theological arguments or treatises or let's study Isaiah 53. They were won by love, period. It was the love of people in their lives that were so kind and so loving to them, even when they were terrible and nasty back. These people were still just loving and wonderful. That showed them, oh, there's something there. There's something real. So, Baruch Hashem, this is good, what you guys are doing. I don't want to, spill the tea. I don't know if any of your community listens to this, but is there any of it that you still feel like we still have some things that are kind of misaligned that we're still kind of gradually moving towards? Are there more things, or at this point do you kind of feel like this feels like we have real integrity here with what we want to pass on to the next generation?
Well, I think we're after several years of a slow trickle of change and a slow trickle of people leaving. We didn't have a split. We didn't have tons of people leave at once. And in a way, it was more painful because it was almost like you get PTSD. The next person's going to leave too.
Somebody sends you an email and you're like, are you sending us an email to tell us you're leaving?
Yeah.
Right.
I feel, and Jennifer can speak to this as well, I feel like it's like a new day has dawned, and I feel like the culture has shifted. And I feel like for now, what's left to do is to continue to fill out that foundation that's already been relayed. And it's, adding a piece of liturgy here, or, what's interesting is at first the liturgy was it was hard for people because they weren't used to it. One of the big things that told me we turned the corner was I was worried when we were going to take out the English. We say the English, then we say the Hebrew. We still do some English, but usually we'll do English when we don't do Hebrew on some short things.
We only say English of things that we're not saying in Hebrew.
But, for years it was you don't say the Hebrew if you don't already also say the English. I was worried when we were to take the English out. Well, by that time, when we took the English out, nobody made a peep about it. It was like...
Nobody balked. We just one day stopped doing the English, and I think we actually said that we're removing the English to make space for more liturgical songs. So we do a lot of our liturgy in song form, like Sim Shalom, Mi Chamocha. We do it with instruments. It's easier for people to remember, to catch on, to learn. Yeah. And it just creates a vibrant atmosphere in the service. So we explained it that way. We said we're taking out the English so we can add some more songs and things like that. And people were like, okay. And nobody complained. Not one complaint about it.
That's so cool.
But I would say my thing with where I knew we were fine, because when we made the transition, we had introduced Avot and Gevurot, and then we introduced Kedusha and something else. And people saw this giant chunk of Hebrew, and they're like, I think this is a step too far. I don't think we're going to be able to do this. And I said, no. You're going to be fine. Give it 6 months. You will be totally fine. And they're like, oh, I don't know. 6 months later, they were totally fine. Meanwhile, now here we are. I think we were 2 years after that. I'm one of our cantors for our congregation, and there was in the middle of Kedusha where I had a coughing fit, and I had to turn off my mic, stop. The congregation just kept going.
Yay.
No break.
Wow.
Everything just kept rolling along. Nobody, lost it. And I literally, at the end of that piece of liturgy, my mic was back on, and I said, see, you guys don't even need me.
That's great.
So cool.
That's great.
So cool.
So, and it's really been beautiful also to see, when we say to our Gentile congregants, you may have come here thinking that you have to follow Torah and you have to do all these things and da-da-da-da. But we want to tell you, you actually don't have to follow Torah. You're not obligated to follow all commandments.
Yeah.
You certainly should learn what the Torah says and follow the principles and ethics and all of these things that are contained within Torah. And the more knowledge you have, the more God can use you to speak wisdom to other Jewish people who may come in your path. But this is not an obligation for you, but we welcome you to worship because you feel called here to worship. We welcome you to worship with us. The burden that becomes lifted off of them is so great. And I don't think they even realized that they had taken on this burden.
Yes.
And so actually we have Gentiles in our congregation that are just way more free. They're just here. They're here to enjoy the service. I asked them, I'm like, how do you feel about all this Hebrew and liturgy and stuff? And most of them are like, I really love it. I just find it to be so beautiful. And so they're there not out of this obligation, but truly out of a love and wanting to be part of our community. So there's just a beautiful purity that has come from realigning how we talk about all of this stuff and how we interact with the Gentiles in our community. We were doing Sim Shalom this past Shabbat, and as we were singing Sim Shalom, I was meditating on the words of it and thinking, it's all grant peace to Israel. And I'm thinking, this is touching my heart. How should the Gentiles in our community be feeling about this? And I really felt compelled to just say a word. And thankfully, Rabbi doesn't mind when I do that. So I said, everybody, you can sit down. I just want to say something really quickly. And I said, to our Gentiles that are in our community, these pieces of liturgy, you can say with us, even though it's addressed to Israel, you are sojourning with us. You have chosen to be within our spiritual community. So these pieces of liturgy that we say, you can say them in solidarity with us. And a lot of the liturgy is also looking forward to the redemption of Mashiach and the return of Mashiach, and for the restoration of Israel as a people and as a nation on this earth. And you as believers are longing for that as well alongside of us. And, and it was also, of course, we're on the eve of Tisha B'Av. And I said, so I want to encourage you. You don't have to fast, but I want to encourage you to fast if you want to with us, or to fast from something, and to really feel the pain that we feel of the loss of the temple. Because while we have the Spirit here with us, inside of us, imagine how palpable it must have been to have the presence of God within the temple, and we no longer have that. And we are longing to have that once again when Messiah returns. So you can join with us in the sorrow and also crying out to God for the return of the Mashiach. So, it's things like that, ways in which within the ethos of what's going on in our congregation, that we're sharing with our Gentile brothers and sisters how they are still a very, very much a part of what we are doing. Yes, this is Jewish. Yes, this is our worship. But you've chosen to come live with us and to be in community with us. So this is how you can also understand this and know this and take it on for yourself in a way that's healthy. So.
Yeah.
I kind of have, of course, because I'm a leader also, some practical questions, because I always want to learn about communities. So I kind of want to do 3 of them, but I think maybe if we could start with, I would assume just like everybody else that you get a fair amount of visitors who are not aligned with your values, and how you deal with that. The second one is just like, how long is your service? Like, what do you offer childcare? Like those sorts of things. Like what are just kind of some of those logistical things? And now I'm totally forgetting the third one. So let's just start with that first one. Just kind of like, you have the internet, right? So of course you're having people visit and
we live
not
stream.
often, right? And you live stream, right? And so they're taking a look at you first, and then they're going to come and they're going to visit. And if they don't align really with your values, how do you handle that?
It's a good question. So, every situation is different. Every person is different, of course, and you just never know what you're going to get coming through the door because of this wonderful thing called the internet. What we've found is, first of all, we've created, the Lord has really created this culture, okay? It is a very Jewish culture. And what has gone on, let me tangent off for just a second. What we have seen as we've shifted this way is we're getting a lot of Jewish visitors, whereas we would get, some here and there, but it's more. We have several non-believing Jewish people in Yeshua every week that come to the synagogue now.
And have stayed.
And they have stayed. And, they're opening up to Yeshua. But the culture is very Jewish. the essence of the congregation is very, very steeped in Judaism and the structure of the service. So one of two things happens. Either they come and they don't come back because they quickly realize this isn't what I thought it might be.
It's not a playground for crazy.
Right. Or they come a few times and maybe they come and they're not Jewish and they're starting to espouse certain things or put on, talit or whatever. And it's just a gentle conversation. After a couple of weeks, if we notice something, then I'll just pull them aside and have a talk about it. I have found that several visitors that were not Jewish in the last year, after I did that, were very receptive. And maybe it's just the Lord giving us a season of grace in this because we really haven't had the hostility of some hardcore Hebrew roots person coming in and being like, well, you need to do this.
Or how dare you?
From time to time, but
How dare
it's not
you,
as
right.
frequent as it was.
I think really the approach is we kind of have like a 2-week approach. The first week, we have some unofficial watchers, like people that spy out like, that's a new person, and oh wait, they put on a talit. So generally, either Jude or myself will try and find an opportunity to go up to them and say, hi, how'd you find out about us?
Exactly.
Are you Jewish? And so I've had somebody say to me, oh, well, I took a DNA test. I have Jewish, I'm Jewish, and I found out I'm Jewish. And I said, oh, so you have Jewish ancestry. That's really beautiful. But, and I'll, kind of, depending on maybe jump into that whole question of like what it means to actually be Jewish or not. But we're definitely that first week kind of doing a general suss out of that person. We've spotted them, we're keeping an eye on them, and then by the second week, like if I had a chance to talk to them and found out, well, they're not actually really Jewish, and then the second week they're still wearing a talit, that's when Jude will take an opportunity to sit with them at Kiddush afterwards and talk to them some more, and then explain to them why we don't have Jewish people wearing talits in our congregation.
You mean Gentile?
And sometimes,
Right.
Non-Jewish people.
non-Jewish
non-Jewish
people.
people, right?
And sometimes they don't come back after that, or like Jude said, they will say, "Oh, I did not know that. I didn't understand," and they'll put the talit away and continue to come to services.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Do you find that there are people that are either Hebrew roots or one law that stay for a while, and then at some point, do you have like a formal conversation? You've been here for 6 months. Maybe it's time to start thinking about membership, and then some of that other conversation happens, or do you find that because of the environment you've created, people aligned with those values don't typically stay anymore?
For me, I would say it's the latter. I'm sensing a lot and seeing a lot where people just are not spending a lot of time here with us because they quickly catch what we're about and they quickly get the vibe, so to speak. The vibe is you're not going to come in here and blow a shofar. You're not going to, do this or do that. We're very careful about it. And the service is very uniquely Jewish now. It's very Siddur driven. We have pews and we have Siddurs sitting in the pews, and everything is in reference to that focus point and bringing people through the Siddur. So we really don't have a lot of that anymore. And when we do, again, it's a conversation. The other thing I wanted to mention was, probably like you, we do not have any shortage of Hebrew roots places around us, right?
Right.
I think in our county alone, there's got to be probably 5 or 6 fellowships. And with the growth of that over the last few years, people are, because we live stream, because we have a website, because we kind of broadcast who we are, I don't even think they come in the door as much anymore because there's this Hebrew roots place on the corner that they
Where they
quickly
can wave their flags and
Right.
blow their shofar.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
I do remember what my other question was, but I'll save that. So then the second one, just kind of like structure of your service, how long it takes, like what have you guys landed on?
Okay. Do you want to take it? Or
You can take it.
Okay. So we really, again, we're driven by the Siddur, which has been what's driven our people since, for over 1,000 years. So we very much follow that structure, being, we open up with the songs of praise, the Pazukei de Zimra. We go into...
However, in the Pazukei de Zimra section, that's where we've placed our contemporary praise and worship.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we say, so we say Baruch She'amar, and then we do 5 contemporary praise and worship, and then we wrap up. Our final song is Ashrei Yoshvei. Ashrei Yoshvei Beiteh. It's a really beautiful melody, and that transitions us into the rest of our liturgy.
Yeah, so we carry through the service. It's a 2-hour service. And
30-minute message from the rabbi.
It's about a 30-minute message from me, and we also have we have the Pazukei de Zimra, we have the Shema portion, we have the Amidah, the Shemona Esrei, we have a Torah service, my message, and we end with the Don Olam in a nutshell. But and we have, when we open the Torah, we lane from the Torah a bit, and then we have a drash rotation of people that does like a 5-minute on the Parsha.
Okay.
That frees me up to do a 30-minute message. I'm currently going through the book of the Psalms, and I can preach on Psalms, and so that's kind of cool because we can give a little bit other theology than just the first 5 books, and we do have a drash. But overall, you put it all together, it's right about 2 hours.
But we also we have what we call Torah for Today after Kiddush time. So at 1 o'clock, our service goes 10 to 12. At 1 o'clock, for whoever wants to stay, it's basically like a big discussion Bible study where we go through a book of the Bible. We just started the letters of Paul. So we're in Romans, and we'll take like a chapter or so, and we just read a portion, discuss it, argue about it, correct a lot of bad theology there, and then keep moving on. That's been a really great
Is that led
place.
by the two of you? Like, are the two of you
we
really
have
primary?
approved moderators.
Gotcha.
Of which we are 2 of them.
We are 2 of them.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we
But
rotate
like
around.
anybody can raise their hand during that time and be
Absolutely.
like, I'm going to now tell you the most crazy thing about the book of Revelation you've ever heard. And you'd be like, okay, and address it.
And, well, sometimes we'll address it, and sometimes we'll be like, that's something you need to talk to the rabbi about later. We're going to stick onto the chapter that we're on right now.
Yeah.
So
Like
we
that.
do have parameters, and we stay within those parameters. But yeah,
How long is that?
Yeah.
Is that about an hour?
that's an hour and a half.
Hour and a half. Okay.
Really? Okay.
Bubby.
Yeah.
Well, we have restrictions of what we can offer on a Saturday. People come from so far away. We try to make sure things are happening, but we would have like a men's meeting after one Shabbat, a women's meeting, a leaders meeting, so it kind of fits in. It takes that time slot away from us. But the question I wanted to ask was, who is leading the drash? Are Gentiles leading drashes? Do you
So we have
authorize
a
Gentiles to
rotation.
lead? I know, but are they part of the rotation? I'm curious.
To give the 5-minute drash during
Yes.
the service?
Are Gentiles giving the drash? Okay.
Yes, we do
All right.
have them come up. We don't have them. So the way
because
we
it's
do it,
outside of the reading of the Torah.
yeah.
Got it. Right.
So we do
Yeah.
the blessing, the reading, the closing blessing, and then the drash.
So
So-
the
Okay,
people
I get
who
it.
are reading, are those people Jewish then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And do you have another time of reading the Brit Chadashah, or
Yes,
is it
we
just
do
that?
Haftarah and Brit Chadashah.
Okay.
But
Okay,
no
all right.
commentary or drashes on either of those.
Okay.
Got it.
Interesting.
Okay. Is Haftorah read by a Jewish person as well?
Yeah, well, both of our cantors, it's the cantor that does it, and both of the cantors
Oh.
are Jewish, so yeah.
Oh, got it. Okay. All right. So it's always just the 2 cantors that are
Yes.
reading, and
Yeah.
then somebody is invited up to give a brief homily, on it.
Well,
Okay.
not only for Torah, not for Haftarah
Torah.
and Brit
Right.
Chadashah.
Yeah.
Right.
Got it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But so before the Hagibah, or is it after the scroll is dressed and everything? When does the drosh happen?
So what we do is we open up, that we process the Torah, we have it undressed, and typically a couple of different people, one of them being me, we lane. We go through the Hebrew and the English of the Torah, do the blessings, the Haftarah, the Brit Hadashah. The Torah is still placed on the bima with now the mantle over it. and
We do the Misha Berach for the Olay.
We do the Misha Berach
for the reader.
Yeah,
And then we
invite up the drash
person
to do a homily from the podium, which is next to the Torah.
Right.
Which is
Got
the
it.
bima is separate than the
bima is
not
separate.
at the bima.
Right.
Yeah, isn't
And
it
they'll go
funny
sit
that
down.
the
They'll go
symbolism
sit
is
down.
powerful?
Yeah, so they'll sit down, and then we do Misha Berach for anyone who's sick. We incorporate now every week Achenu since October 7th, so we'll sing Achenu. And then we do Vizot HaTorah and dress the Torah, but the person sits with the Torah while we do Haftarah, Brit Chadashah, and then we do Etz Chaim and put the Torah back in the ark.
Yeah.
Okay.
Could I
Very
ask
cool.
a further question
I like
too
that.
about the kids ministry? Do you have programs for the children, and if so, when do they go out? How often do you do that? Is it every Shabbat? How do you deal with that?
So we have nursery for 0 to 3, and we have 2 buildings. So the nursery is actually in the building where the sanctuary is.
Okay.
So we want those little ones to be nearby their parents, and that's from the beginning of service all the way through to the end of service. Parents can choose to put their kids in the nursery, or they don't have to. We don't care if your kid's crying. I don't really care. So I'm just happy a child is here. So,
Amen.
Yeah. Right.
and then 4 to 12, we dismiss after the Torah procession. So before we get into the Torah reading, 4 to 12. But for like our holiday services, we only dismiss 4 to 7, and 8 to 12 stays in because we want them to experience the full holiday service. And if we have any like 12-year-olds that are, in training for bar bat mitzvah, we'll have them stay in longer so they experience everything.
Good. Yeah.
And that
Experience
is
the full
weekly.
Torah service.
Right.
And that's every week.
Yes.
Every week.
Okay. And is it like a rotation then of people that are working with the
Yes.
kids and also the nursery? Okay.
Yes.
Very
The
cool.
nursery, we have hired people for the nursery. We find that it just gives us continuity. So the same 2 ladies, we pay, so they're there, vetted, background checked, all that stuff. And anybody who works with any minors in our congregation, whether it's in the AV booth, whether it's in Shabbat school, wherever it is, you have to be background checked. We also do not do only one teacher or one nursery worker. We always have a teacher and a helper.
Yeah.
So there's always 2 adults or almost adults. Sometimes the helper could be like an older teen, but just because we just feel it's
Absolutely.
really important for safety.
Very wise.
Yeah.
Very wise.
Yeah.
For sure.
Of course. Similar.
You said you guys have like a kiddush time like after the service. Is that ever like full oneg, or is it just like some snacks, or is it oneg every Shabbat? What does that look like?
So the way it works is right after service and before our tour for today, which is in our same kiddush room or oneg room in our community center, we do typically week to week we do bagels and coffee and challah. Once a month, the first Shabbat of the month, we have our birthday celebration, and we get a sheet cake from Sam's Club. And we sing happy birthday to all of our birthday people.
Right, we do too.
So that's
right.
kind of cool.
Yeah,
Everybody likes the
yeah.
birthday week.
Yeah.
And then I would say 4 or 5 times a year,
Or once a quarter or something.
once a quarter, we have a special kiddush. Maybe it's to honor, moms for Mother's Day or veterans.
We did a 4th of July because 4th of July was like really close to a
Yeah.
Saturday.
That's
So we
good.
call
Yeah.
it 4th of
Yeah.
July kiddush and
that's a covered dish.
yeah.
So people bring food. Time to
And
time.
then when we do that, we do cancel Torah for today. We cancel all activities. So we do also have an Israeli folk dance class that meets, and we have a grief support group that meets the 1st and 3rd. So on a day where we have kiddush, a full covered dish, we will cancel all afternoon activities, and we specifically say we want to have more time to fellowship and sit around and talk, and so all afternoon activities are canceled.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Okay. Man, Bubby, did you have any more questions?
No, I really like the way they were able to tell us just the progression of how they went from where they were to where they are now. And I love the way you're doing your service. I think we've been concerned about whether or not to take the English out, and at one point we did take the English out, remember, and then but with the English being in the Siddur, I don't see why we have to say it too. It takes up so much time to say it, but
Yes.
I think we have a lot of similarities, and certainly a similarity of spirit in what we're trying to accomplish, and I can certainly appreciate that. But I love your heart. I love the way you're loving people into, what if you had to say all of Torah standing on one foot, it would be the Shema plus love your neighbor as yourself, right? And it's like, because that's the essence of it. And, one of the things when I teach Shabbat school, sometimes when I'm talking to the kids and they know we don't put a siddur on the ground, but I tell them with a caveat, if you see an adult put a siddur on the ground, you do not go correct them. If you see another kid do it, you can lovingly say something, but I don't want to ever see you shaming an adult for doing something. That's worse than the fact that they put it on the ground type thing. But I feel like we've covered a lot of ground. I guess the other thing I was going to ask is, would you say that your congregation, your demographics, what percentage do you have of just purely Gentile people? I'm not including mixed marriages. What would you say your percentage is of Jew to Gentile in your congregation?
Oh, if you're excluding mixed marriages, that
I
changes.
know.
No,
Not
excluding mixed marriages.
Well, okay, even if you're,
Okay.
Go ahead.
So what would you say? You probably would handle all the numbers. But.
I would say, it's interesting. I think it's about 35% Jewish.
Okay.
Maybe 40 if you include all the
that's
mixed.
similar, right?
And it's skewed more since in the last few months.
And it's changing. Like I said, we have a lot of Jewish visitors now, and a lot of non-believing Jews that are, they're still checking out this Yeshua guy, but they're comfortable with the service. This is what I remember as a kid, or I'm really glad you're doing this. And so I would say probably 35-40%.
Interesting.
That's
do you
pretty
do
cool.
anything special to help the mixed marriages, the non-Jewish person in that family? Do you do anything to help them find their niche, and to understand who they are and how important it is that they are passing to the children their identity? Do you have any dealings with that at all?
So I would say currently no, because most of our mixed marriages have no kids in the home. They're older couples.
Okay.
So we're not dealing with, and in actuality, the majority of the time it's the Gentile person the Gentile spouse that finds us, that says, I wanted to come to a place where my Jewish spouse would be comfortable. And, I think it's important for them, and, they're not comfortable in the church where we were going. So we haven't really had to address that because it's not really been an issue for us yet.
Okay.
We had historically a lot more younger kids before. With the transition and people leaving and going and going to other congregations in the area, we did tend to lose a lot of our kids.
But most of those kids were not Jewish. And families that were not Jewish.
Right. So we're only now kind of rebuilding our kids' ministry. So I think that challenge is in front of us as we grow more.
Yeah. I am curious. You said that some of this was about door to door for yourselves, even of we really want something that's sustainable, something for the future, Messianic Judaism to have a future. You guys have 6 children, and I don't want you to spill all the tea, but I'm curious, have you seen the benefit of that transition? Even in the way that your own children are viewing Messianic Judaism as more viable?
I would say yes. I would say, remember when I mentioned that there was that move where we said we're sending our kids to camp, and it was the 3 younger ones that went. And even though the oldest of the 3 younger ones only went to camp 2 years.
2 years.
I would say that the 3 of them have a much more vibrant Jewish expression than their older siblings. Their older siblings, some of them, they all identify as Jewish. They all very proudly are Jewish. they're not necessarily in congregational life. Not all of them live with us still. And some of them are, like really easily navigate between churches and all of that stuff. Whereas our younger ones are like, if I went somewhere that didn't have a Messianic synagogue that I liked, that was Jewish, I would go to a Jewish conservative or conservative synagogue. And and that's not necessarily the case. And some of our older 3 children have talked about the craziness of the Judaism that they grew up in, their Judaism that they have.
Yes.
And so it's unfortunate for us that we didn't come to this, but you have to just lay that on the altar and say, Lord, this was all part of your plan and the timeline that you had, and you know what the reason for that is. But so there's this very palpable, I mean, we haven't discussed it with them, but I think, and I don't think even we've discussed it, but I think you would agree with me, there's this palpable split between the older 3 and the younger 3. And I attribute that really to the realignment of our synagogue life, our move to the UMJC, and certainly going to camp. Also sending them to like Devar Emet's Winter Aliyah program and things like that, where they're really surrounded by Jewish kids and Jewish kids who can say, we don't, that belt loop seat stuff is weird. And they can all they can talk about it and understand like, what, we understand that. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
That makes so much sense to me. It's interesting. I think one of the, I don't know if it's an accusation against the UMJC and our lean towards maybe more traditional Jewish life is that you can end up with kids who would rather worship in a synagogue than in a church. And kind of like part of that is, do they love Yeshua? Do they love Yeshua enough, like that they're willing to, like? And it's interesting to me because I see that as like very, like a false choice. It's not like you have to do that. I think that there is this feeling, right, from outside of traditional Judaism that if you were to go to a traditional synagogue, that they would immediately want to see your bona fides as you walk in the door, and they're like, "Oh, you love Yeshua, get out of here." And actually, I think that that's not necessarily the reality anymore. I think that there's a real certainly I've talked to multiple people that have had that experience where they've gone into a traditional synagogue and they've just been absolutely welcomed. But there's this feeling sometimes like we're like too far leaning towards Judaism and not far leaning enough towards Yeshua-ness or Yeshua faith, right? I see that as a false dichotomy. But I was wondering if you guys have encountered any of that sort of thinking, like in, I don't know, maybe people that you knew before this transition who are like now looking from the outside, or are there any of those conversations happening?
Well, I think that is a natural thing for people to think when you shift more to a liturgical or a Jewish mindset in a lot of ways, because it's almost like a this or that. It's it's one or the other. Right. We've been very intentional with our services, our events, the life of our congregation to continue to infuse Yeshua throughout. I preach all the time and I teach all the time and bring in Yeshua. The whole idea is we want to normalize that you can be extremely Jewish and extremely Yeshua-centered at the same time. And I think that's the next step for Messianic Judaism is, well, one of the steps I think is to really re-embrace we are part of the Jewish community. We are part of the people of Israel. We are not us versus them. We're not, it's not biblical Judaism versus rabbinic Judaism or all that mishigas. It's we are in the midst of our people, but we are of the believing remnant, and we should never be ashamed of that. And so we still keep Yeshua very prominent in all of what we do at Kol Mashiach, our congregation. So
I think what they're saying when they say if you go to a traditional synagogue rather than a church is that you cannot have a full expression of your belief in Yeshua within a Jewish liturgical setting. And I think that's a false understanding. That's an understanding that usually comes from people who are more church-centered anyway. And that's a belief that says that, you know, we have to talk about Jesus, Jesus, Jesus all the time.
Right.
Which then that deals with, like, one of my kids' big complaints is they say, you know, I hate that Christian people just always talk about Jesus. Why don't they talk about God? Why don't they talk about Adonai? Why is it always Jesus? It's like, Jesus is just, you know, that's not all there is. And
right.
So they express it the other way. Like, you know, this, by only going to church, you're only seeing a small part of the Tanakh, the whole Bible, the fullness of Scripture and understanding of God. And if people believe that going to synagogue is denying Jesus, they would be really upset to find out that my kids, and not because of anything we told them, because remember, we had extensive church attendance prior to joining Messianic Judaism. Our kids, if you ask them, are you Christian? Our kids will say no. We never told them that. We never said, in fact, I used to sit with them and go, well, we are. We believe in, you know, Yeshua as the Messiah. And they're like, I am not Christian, because to them, Christian is going to that church.
Right.
It's that culture.
Right. A lot of the times being anti-Semitic.
Exactly.
Being replacement theology minded.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so for them, they said, they've said to me, I don't have anything in common with church people other than the fact that we both believe that Jesus is the Messiah. But their understanding of the Bible and of God even is fundamentally different. We celebrate different holidays. We have a different culture. So, you know, we do have one kid that's more fluid and kind of, you know, will easily navigate back and forth, but that's just kind of who they are as a person in general. But I think it's just this misnomer that you can't be fully Jewish and believe that Yeshua is the Messiah and have a full understanding of Yeshua as Messiah if you're rooted in Judaism. And that's a false, you know, that's a false understanding.
Absolutely.
Yeah, amen. It's interesting. I think my oldest, my daughter, is wrestling with the same sort of things. She has a job currently that requires her to miss Shabbat frequently with our service, and so she's found herself at a large, you know, independent charismatic church near her. And as I'm starting to have conversations with her, at first it was exciting. There's lots of people there, like, you know, big lights and fog machines and cool stuff. But after a while, and especially post October 7th, in which the anti-Semitism has grown so rampant in the body of Messiah, she's having to have more, especially among young people, she's having to have more and more conversations with young people who are church friends about what you're saying is anti-Semitic, what you're saying is not anti-Israel. It's against the Jewish people. And that alone has become something, like you said, it's the culture, Christianity, the culture. And oh man, I'm sure we've all experienced it where we've been in church services and there's an entire sermon that's based on an interpretation of a passage that actually has nothing to do with the actual historical context and Jewish context of what's happening in that passage. And you just want to, like, it's hard. You want to put your head in your hands and, like, it's like, oh my goodness, So, well, it sounds like you guys are just so intentional and lovely, and thank you for sharing so much of who you are. I'm really grateful for. It's a really long conversation, and you didn't have to do it at all, and I'm just so grateful for that. It's so helpful just for me personally. I think this will also be really helpful for other people, other leaders too, who are really wrestling through like how to maintain integrity to what they want Messianic Judaism to look like in the future, and to wrestle through some choices that we're making. Doesn't it? It feels like, as with any movement that begins and then has to mature, there's that founding generation that's just so excited and on fire, and they're just making all kinds of crazy decisions and just woo. And then at some point, somebody's got to come along and be like, okay, great, but now what are we going to pass on?
Exactly.
In a very deliberate and intentional way, what are the things that we need to pass on for the next generation? I also wonder, this is just listening to you guys today. This is my own little personal theory, but we've seen such a slowdown of Jewish people coming to faith in Messiah, at least in the same way that we saw kind of in the 60s and 70s. It seemed like there was this explosion, right? I'm wondering if it's because God needs for us to become something different in order for that next generation. Go for it. Say something.
Okay. So really what drove our change, like I said, was our kids coming home from camp and saying, why don't we know this?
Right.
But what we have seen across the board is there is a move amongst Gen Zs. Josh, you talk to your kids. The move towards a very deeply historically rooted expression of faith. So you see a move away from evangelical churches to Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, Catholic. Those three expressions of Christianity are exploding amongst the younger generation. And there is a return to Judaism, structured Judaism amongst Jewish kids. They're not happy just being culturally Jewish anymore. They're celebrating Shabbat more. They want to learn and understand more. And what we have found in our own congregation of our young people, they're the ones that drive, this isn't enough liturgy. We need to put in this. We want this. Why are we still doing the English? So they're the ones pushing for this. And when we've talked to other people, like when we go to summer conferences for the union, the young people across the board say the same thing. They want a deeply rooted traditional expression of Judaism. So this has been driven by our young people, and they're integrated in all aspects of our service. Up front, they, are Torah attendants, they lane, they give drashes, they're leading praise and worship, still trying to convince some of them to cantor. But they are very much what is driving our congregation. And they are the ones that are excited and passionate about this being a place where their Judaism has full expression and their knowledge and understanding of Yeshua collides with that in a very beautiful and seamless way. So I think this is really, if congregations need to not be short-sighted, and they need to see that making a move to a more traditionally Jewish expression of your service is actually what's going to attract the young people to you.
Interesting.
They
Good
want
point.
authentically Jewish community and life.
That's so interesting. I felt like the last conference that we were at just now, the Boston one, there were more young people there.
Yes.
And I don't know if it's just like there's just a lot more Messianic Jewish communities on the East Coast than there are on the West Coast. Like we're all scattered like out here in California. But it also felt like there was this, it wasn't like a begrudging, like my parents made me come. There was like this, like we're going to get together and we're enjoying each other. And it just, like there was a good vibe, as the young people would say. It was just like a really good vibe of like, for the first time, I thought in a long time, I think I need my kids to come to the summer conference so that they can hang out with. And of course it did help that like a bunch of kids that I met were like, oh, Ellie and Lev, like, yeah, we know them from camp. Or, you know what I mean? And that was really cool too. So I think you're right. I had read a paper on that, on like this need for stability and things that last, right? I mean, if you talk about an anxious generation, an anxious generation wants solidity. They want rhythm. They want structure. They want things that mean something. We're doing this on purpose for these reasons. So this totally makes sense to you. Man, we should have like 5 more conversations with you guys at least. Please, we will want to invite you again because this is absolutely wonderful. But our free software that we use is running out. So we're at an hour and 52 minutes. I can't even believe that. It's really wonderful.
Oh, my
what a great
goodness.
conversation this has been. I know, right? So Jude and Jennifer, thank you so much. Really grateful for this conversation today.
Wonderful.
For hearing your guys' hearts.
Thank you for having us. It's been great.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, you're certainly welcome. Say hi to one of your kiddos who I met at the summer conference.
I
the
bet
one.
We will.
Yeah, I know the
Say
one.
hi to
Yeah.
him. And
Yeah.
Yep. And another one
but-
was just to camp with your kids.
Oh, cool.
Oh,
Excellent.
they're coming
Say
back
hi
today,
to all of your
I
kiddos
think,
for us.
right?
We really appreciate you so much.
Yes. Wonderful.
Ours are, yeah. Ours are like soon flying. Well, sort of soon flying out. The only direct flight we could get them was late at night, but that's okay. All right, bless you guys.
Yes.
I'm going to go ahead and click stop. Hey, once again, if anybody's interested, our community is Beth Yeshua in Sacramento. You can find us by doing a Google search for that, and we'll see you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you for coming. Wonderful.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can always visit bethyeshua.org for more.